Hi, Stefan.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, hello. Just let me adjust this. I think it's a bit better like that. I'm so thrilled you're up in Finland as well. That's a really, how lovely. I was thinking about Finland a lot the last few days. This is, yeah, your forests are really extraordinary, aren't they? What it means to be in such a landscape compared to England, where it says everything is very damaged, you know. I think this is really worth it, you see, because how Finland is so important. Because these places on Gaia where the ecosystem is still intact is so important for inspiration for the whole of humanity, really. So I see that Finland has got and Norway and Sweden got a very big role to play.
So, hello everyone. I'm Taina de Carvalho, and today we are welcoming Stephan Harding. And thank you for everyone who is here with us today. So this interview is part of the International Colloquium 2021, Ecosocial Crisis and Educational Proposals that was held a few weeks ago. So I invite everyone interested in the subject to get familiar with the conference and with the link that we will put here later. So I present myself and our association shortly, and then I will present our guest. So we are Painovoima Association, a cultural well-being and eco-socially oriented non-profit association based in Lahti in Finland. Our members come from multidisciplinary field, and we cooperate also with universities. We have for 5 years now actively contributed to the development of European culture in various structures of society through our interdisciplinary projects that support culture, environment, sustainability, social justice, and education. And we are part also of projects in the field of circular economy. Myself, I'm an artist, an art therapist, and an educator about art-based eco-social pedagogy. So the conference and this interview are part of the Lahti European Green Capital 2021 events. So Stefan will first have his 15 or 25 minutes presentation, or maybe 30 minutes, and then we will have time for discussion. So people in the audience can ask questions or tell comments, or if any thoughts and ideas has raised me, please do put us comments. There's a chat in Zoom. I think most people are following us through YouTube, but you can put the messages also there. So Stephan Harding is founding member of Schumacher College in UK, where he has taught alongside many of the world's leading ecological thinkers and activists, including Arne Naes, David Abram, James Lovelock, and Lynn Margulis. He is now the Deep Ecology Fellow at Schumacher College. Stephan is also founding chairholders of the Arne Naes Chair in Global Justice and the Environment at the University of Oslo. He is also known for his profound book, Animate Earth, Science, Intuition, and Gaia. So if you are ready, Stephan.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Before we start, I just want to play a little bit of music from where I was born, which is in Venezuela, just to relax. This is real nature music from when I was born. So that's just to remind us, this is all about nature. So this little talk I prepared for you, I'm aiming it for teachers of children maybe from 10 to 18 years old. That's what I'm imagining, who you are out there. That's how I imagine you. And so I thought I would just take you through, hope you can still see me. I'll just wait for the screen to get large. I'll just take you through, I thought, what might be helpful for you to know about how to connect children with Gaia, or how, some suggestions. So Gaia for children. I know you're not the children. I know you're the teachers of the children, but I've got those children in mind around 10 to 18 years old. That's who I'm thinking of, okay? So what do they need to know? That's me. What do they need to know? The first thing they need to know is that we have 4 ways of knowing, not just thinking. This comes from the great Swiss psychologist, C.G. Jung. We have 4 ways of knowing, 4. So our intuition, our sensing, our feeling, and our thinking. And of course, our culture just concentrates on thinking. And we have to tell them right from the start, you have 4 ways of knowing, right? You can sense with your senses. You can feel the beauty of things. You can feel the value of something, the beauty, the importance of something. You can have intuitions about what this whole thing is all about. And you can think about it. That's who you are as a human being. We only focus on thinking, and that's why we destroy the planet. So we cultivate these 4 ways of knowing in our young people. And when we do that, they have an experience of Gaia. Because we make sure that they're doing this discovery of themselves, these 4 ways of knowing in themselves, always in relation to nature, always, 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 always in the forest, in the field, in the garden, always by the river, by the lake, camping. So then they find Gaia. Now, what is Gaia? Well, I think for me, Gaia is knowing the earth is alive. When you really have the experience, the earth is alive. And it sort of comes on you as a wonderfully beautiful, calming realization. Wow, the earth really is alive. What an extraordinary thing. And how interesting that is from a scientific point of view, from an emotional point of view. Because for a child, it's just knowing it, like you do when you're a child, without questioning it. You know, you feel the source from which it comes. And you join all the indigenous cultures all over the world who charted the pathway into knowing this, who explored it very deeply. So we have to tell them about this. Gaia, what is the word? It's the knowing of the earth as alive through your thinking, your feeling, your sensing, your intuition. That's what Gaia is. And there are our ancestors from other cultures and even our own culture. They did it extremely well, and they were able to connect with something very essential at the center of things, which guided them in their lives. You can do the same. You can do the same. That is accessible to you. We say that to the young people. But then you tell them the story of how we lost it in our culture. We lost that in our culture 100%, so badly. And so you, maybe at the right age, depends on the child, tell them about Descartes in a way that they simply cannot believe how anyone could possibly see the world in such a crazy way, that it was a dead piece of matter, like a great machine, and only inside was there any kind of soul. Only inside us was there any kind of soul at all. Everything else had no soul. And this soul of ours was isolated and outside nature, connected to God through some strange process. I mean, what a horrible view. And this view took over Western culture. It became the predominant view in our culture, and it's led to the planetary crisis. You can tell them about the planetary boundaries when they're older, maybe. I mean, you know, the biodiversity boundary, which we've now crossed massively, and the climate change boundary, and this green area is the safe operating space. So we can take some nature. Gaia gives us a Gaia gift, but not too much. If we go across the boundary, everything starts falling apart. They probably know that already, so I wouldn't harp on about it too much. It should be in the background. But the key thing is, from a thinking point of view, what do they need to learn, these young people? You know, in terms of scientific thinking, which is very important. What's the key idea they need from science in their thinking to help their thinking mind, to satisfy their thinking mind? And the key idea, I would say, is feedback. You've got to understand feedback, that everything is related to everything else through mutual relationships. And often you have an effect here. It moves around the very complex system, and then eventually it comes back to you. That's what's known as feedback. That's how nature operates. And the person who was really brilliant at feedback, you need to tell them, is a British inventor called James Lovelock. And James Lovelock really understood feedback because he invented all sorts of scientific instruments. Some were sent to Mars on landers to look for life on Mars, you know. And you can tell them an awful lot about James Lovelock. He's a very mythical person, but he has a very mythological side to him, I would say. Heroic. And so he, of course, was the one who later discovered Gaia. You see, you could say, here's Gaia appearing in his garden and looks into his mind and thinks, he can understand what I'm talking about. He's a scientist, but he understands me. Gaia. The earth is alive, remember, Gaia. And so soon after, he was joined by Lynn Margulis, a great American biologist, evolutionary biologist, who was a real expert on the microbes, you know. I mean, really understood the microbial life and evolution and biology at a deeply cellular level, but specifically in relation to the microbes. Quite phenomenal. And together, they cultivated what Lovelock had called Gaia Theory, which is the scientific understanding of the earth as a living being. Gaia Theory. Well, that's good, because now you can tell the kids, look, there's science, there's some really good science behind this, and really interesting science as well. This is the kind of science you're going to want to do. So the idea in Gaia Theory is that the earth has, if you like, two aspects. One is the biota, which is all the living beings, all the biologically alive beings, you know, plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, seaweeds, all of the living beings. And there's also the rocks, all the rocks of the planet, the atmosphere, the air currents, and the water, the oceans and the rivers. And these are intimately connected to each other. So the biota, the living beings, they have a huge impact on the rocks, on the atmosphere, and on the water. And there's many stories you could tell here about the ways in which this happens. I mean, it's extraordinary. One I might just briefly mention is there's a good case that if it weren't for life, there would be no water by now. And if there were no water by now, there would be no plate tectonics. And so our rocks would be completely different. That's one example. The other is obviously that life does photosynthesis and takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and produces oxygen. So you can see that life is having a very profound influence on these things, very profound. And once they've been changed, this is the interesting thing, there's a feedback to the biota. So they now have to live in the very conditions that they've created for themselves. And we can't say what's cause and effect. They feed back into each other. See, you start to establish a connection between rocks, atmosphere, and water and life. You start seeing rocks differently, atmosphere differently, water differently, because now they're influenced massively by life. And what it means is that they're part of an emergent entity at the level of the planet, for whom Lovelock adopted the name Gaia. He had heard this. Gaia was the ancient Greeks' divinity of the earth. He heard that from his friend William Golding. And he liked that name. This is the earth as alive name, Gaia. The earth is alive. What children experience when they're in the forest, camping by the lake, by the campfire. That's Gaia. Ancient. Our birthright to experience that. But now it's in scientific language, which Lovelock's put it into through feedback. When you get feedback between all the living beings, the rocks, the atmosphere, and the water, that feedback, something emerges out of those relationships, which is a being, a living being, planetary living being called Gaia. And what that does, that entity, is it can regulate its own temperature, the distribution of its acids and key elements out of all these relationships. Now, this is quite a concept for some young people, but maybe not. The idea of an emergent property. It emerges from all the interactions of the past. Something emerges as a whole. from out of the parts. And that's at the level of the planet. Its own intelligence, its own ability to self-regulate becomes a self-regulating system. Gosh, that's interesting to think about. And then you give them some examples. So here's one of the organisms that's involved in regulating the temperature. Point out that it's tiny, it's only 2 microns. That's 1/1000th of a millimeter is here. Tiny single-celled alga. They live in the ocean in huge numbers. They're called coccolithophores. There's a bloom of them. I'm around here. This is southwest England. I'm around there. Anyway, here they are floating in the ocean. So you've got to inspire them with this extraordinary story, you know, that in the ocean, I wish Attenborough would talk about this. In the ocean, there are these little algae, which I showed you. They emit a gas, which smells like the sea. And that gas basically seeds clouds. There's water vapor above the gas. When the gas appears amongst the water vapor, the water molecules go crazy for this gas and they condense around it and they make clouds. And these clouds are dense and white on their upper surfaces, and they reflect solar energy back to space, and they cool the Earth. This is on a big scale. That's amazing. These tiny algae are producing cloud seeding gases. And it turns out the forests do it as well on the land. So then you just tell them the feedback, or you just very quickly show them some kind of feedback. And you can be very creative with this in the classroom with them, you know. So those are the coccolithophore blooms. The wiggly line is the interface between the ocean and the atmosphere. Here's the coccolithophore blooms. And you say, okay, if there's more of them, what happens to the gas production, the dimethyl sulfide? That's the gas. Well, there's more gas production. Yes. And then what happens? Well, in the atmosphere, the gas goes into the atmosphere and it makes clouds, seeds clouds. Yeah. And those clouds are dense and white. And so the more clouds, the lower the sea surface temperature. But if the sea surface temperature goes down, the coccolithophore blooms grow less and their populations decrease. But your point is, we've made a feedback, you see. Can you see? And you could take the kids around this feedback in so many different ways, through art, through imagination, through the science, of course, has got to be there. And they'll realize that this is a self-regulating feedback. So if it gets too warm, if the sea surface warms up too much because of the sun beating down on it, you get more algae, more gas, more clouds. And so the temperature goes down because now the sea surface is being shaded by the clouds. But if the sea surface temperature goes down, there's less coccolithophores, less gas, fewer clouds, so the sun can warm up the ocean. And they get the feeling for this dynamic actually happening in the world, because you're encouraging them to use their 4 ways of knowing. And they realize this self-regulates. But it's not just an intellectual understanding, it's a felt as well as intellectual. It's a felt deeply living understanding. And that brings us to deep ecology. So now we're moving to a feeling. We've been looking at thinking, but can you see how that's so deeply connected to feeling? So now we're going to explore the feeling side of this, of those 4 ways of knowing, which the children can explore. And the person who helped me do this is Arne Næss, who I'm sure you know because he was Norwegian. So we'll spend a bit of time with Arne. I was very lucky to spend time with him, and Jim Lovelock and Lynn Margulis. I mean, really, what honor. Anyway, off we go. Look, we're going now to Arne's cabin in Norway with our 3 friends. And can you already feel when you see the mountain? I know it's a PowerPoint slide, but when you try to imagine yourself there, the mountain already starts to open you up. You see, that's feeling. I am feeling the beauty of this mountain and how wild it is and how absolutely beautiful it is. We go further up. That's feeling. I'm in my feeling now. I'm feeling how beautiful this place is. I can feel its value. I can feel how it's got its own life. It's important in itself. We get to the cabin, where we are on his cabin, and we look at the view. And Arne would say, the smaller we come to feel ourselves compared to the mountain, the nearer we come to participation in its greatness. So you take your kids out, your pupils out into the forest in Finland with those marvelous lakes and the forests that you've got, wild places, which I can only dream of. And you're there out there at night with them in campfire, and you discuss this with them. Hey, you say to them, you know, there's that Norwegian philosopher called Arne Næss. He said this, what do you think about it? And we're all around the campfire. And you had some time paddling and swimming in the lakes and being in nature. And you discuss it. Okay, you may not have a mountain in Finland, but you can have a forest compared to the forest, you could say, or the lake. Then, I know I must finish soon. You can also introduce them in the, well, not in this way, but introduce them to looking at plants. I mean, the person who pioneered this was Wolfgang von Goethe in Germany. He found a way of cultivating this feeling for nature. Here he is. And you can show your children this and you can say to them, what do you see in this picture? And they mostly can't see anything. And then all of a sudden they might just see a giraffe, you see. You see a giraffe there. And so that moment of seeing in a new way, we need to apply to nature, to how we see nature. And everything we've learned so far by the lake, by the fire, from nature, we can bring now and bring it even further. And we can take a plant and look at the leaf sequence as we go up the stem. So we're going up the stem now. This is, I think, the ground, and we're going, you can imagine the leaves spiraling around the stem to the flowers, I think, up here. But the thing is to just feel and see, use all those 4 ways of knowing that we have to follow that sequence and trying to get a sense of the being of the plant that's creating it. That's, I know, a very silly way of putting it, but something like that. You just try to feel the process, feel the flow of it, feel the complexity of it, the intelligence of it, whatever. Just really, really let yourself contemplate this. That's important. Then I'm nearly finished now. I would also say it's very important for everyone to have a Gaia place, because the real teaching happens in nature, you know. So you can go out, say, to everyone should have a place near their house or in their house, if it has to be in your house, where there's a bit of wild or somewhere that calls you nature place, maybe some plants on a table, maybe a little piece of woodland not far from you, or a park, I don't know, somewhere where you go, you encourage your pupils, and you do it yourself as a teacher. Go there day after day and day after day without forcing yourself, in a relaxed way. This is one of my Gaia places here in England. And all I can say is I feel the deepest gratitude to this place, you know. And then, of course, you take your children, your young people out into nature. Here's a group of boys in England. This is my son, Oscar, with his friends, and a group of girls, and they're outside. You can do this in Finland to such a huge extent. The level of happiness that's experienced here is just phenomenal. And these two guides, the leaders, they'll tell them myths at night, and they'll feed their dream world very beautifully as they camp under the stars, you know, really fantastic. So just to end, I want to recommend the work of my friend, Chris Salisbury, who runs this English organization called Wildwise. You look up on the internet. I think you might find their work very helpful, and there could be an interesting connection with Finland. And what do you learn from all of this? Well, ultimately, in deep ecology, all life has value in itself. It doesn't matter whether it's useful to us or not. That's what we learn. That's what young people need to feel, I would say, you know, that a moment of understanding. Oh, I see that all life has value in itself, independent of its usefulness to humans. And that becomes a foundation for their life, you know, that sort of insight. And then they realize later that action is important. At some point, you encourage them, or somehow that at some point action is going to be needed. So they could contemplate this. Those who accept this point have an obligation to participate in implementing the necessary changes peacefully and democratically. With the older children, we can discuss this, or even with the younger ones. You'd be amazed what the young ones nowadays, maybe 7, 8 years old, you know, amazing. And just to finish, a couple of books I would recommend. One, I would say this masterpiece by my friend Chris Salisbury, who founded Wildwise, about taking young people out into nature at night. It hasn't been published yet. It's going to be published later this year. But I've read it. I've read the draft of it, and it's just superb, honestly. I think you find it very helpful. Taking children out at night is extremely powerful. And finally, my book, it's not advertising, I'm saying for teachers, if you want to, and you haven't done biology very much, or you haven't done much science, or even if you have, and you want to just get a general feeling of what I'm talking about, then have a read of this. You know, you might find it, I'd be delighted if it would help you as a teacher. That would make me so happy. Okay, well, I think that's all I want to say. So I'm going to stop sharing. And over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephan, for your really inspiring presentation and really emotional presentation as well. In Finland, we have nature really present everywhere. It's like there's more nature than there's maybe cities. We have like 5 million inhabitants in a really big surface. So the families here are really used to be outdoors all the time and by the lake, and people have cottages where they spend time in silence and just with the nature. I have many questions, but maybe I leave questions and comments for other people if somebody wants to comment. Sami Keto was a speaker in the conference. He was in the panel discussion. So.
That's nice. Hi, Sami.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Taina, and hi, Stephan. Thank you for your presentation. I think I missed the very beginning of it, but what I heard was really inspiring. My question is, I guess you kind of touched that already a bit, but to kind of clarify that, how. So I've noticed that this ecological understanding has increased. Let's say that the kind of this interdependence that you are talking about, people are more aware of it nowadays. But it's kind of just knowledge. I don't think that people we are really kind of experiencing it in or feeling it in such a deep level that we would start to act upon it.
That's right.
So would you have some advice or reflections on that?
Well, I mean, my reflection is, I mean, it's very banal in a way, but it really is, but we do have to see the earth as our mother. We really do, you know, unless we see the earth as our mother, really as our mother, we won't understand any of this. We won't get through this mess. Well, not very well anyway. Maybe we'll be lucky. Then we'll create another mess later. Until we see that, I know it sounds very banal, you know, all my Western philosophical and scientific friends go, oh God, so banal. But it's true. I mean, just it's something to contemplate. What does it mean that nature is our mother, you know? What is it? What is that? It's a very interesting thing to contemplate. So somehow, could we get people interested in contemplating that question? I don't know, through culture, through film, through something. Really taking that question as a nice question to work on. Hey, here I am in Finland by the lake, you know, it's so beautiful. Yeah, maybe nature is my mother. maybe, yeah. You present the idea in Finnish culture in a very acceptable way. I don't know how, music or how. It's got to appeal to the older people as well. Very important, because they're the ones that have the remnants of the memories when they were children of connection with nature. Not all of them, of course, but if you get the older people activated like that, that's really something. Then the younger children might follow, you know. So I think that's what you could do. That's the way to do it. I mean, maybe, I don't know. On an emotional level, you know, you think of your mother and the whole archetype of mother and how nourishing, and the planet does nourish us. I mean, it does. And we know how it works now through these extraordinary feedbacks. I mean, wow. Attenborough should be talking about this. We need an Attenborough film about it. But anyway, so I think it's like that. It has to be a very earthy, popular appeal to it. Not some intellectual thing that we can make it into, you know. A real experience, a nice, simple experience of someone just being by a lake and realizing it can be such a sort of ordinary person. Suddenly, right, yeah, this is really alive. Then they start, all their life becomes different after that. They have to rethink everything. My job, this is deep ecology, like Arne. That's what he would call that deep experience. You realize how extraordinary this planet really is and how unbelievably alive and interconnected it is, more than you ever imagined, and how interesting all that is. You know, then you have to change your life because you have to live, you have to harm this as little as possible. You just have to. So you have to think about every aspect of what you're doing. And then you come to a decision. Okay, then I'll do this. I'll go and, I don't know, I'll join, I don't know, you'll do something pro-Gaia, I would say. Now, when I say pro-Gaia, that's also pro-human, because Gaians are part of Gaia. Humans are part of Gaia. You know, there's no anti-humanism in it at all. Not one shred, you know, as has been a misunderstanding in the past, you know, really. And so, well, then you have Gaia, you reach a sort of Gaian understanding, I suppose. And I think that's a nice place for humans to live, inside a living planet. You know, why would anyone not want to live inside a living planet? As long as we're nice to her. If we're not nice to her, as we're discovering, yeah, you see, then you start feeling the absolute force of Gaia. We are starting to experience another side of her, really harsh. Not through any malice. It's just feedback. That's all. We've got to realize what we're experiencing, the feedbacks now. You see, it's a complex time to be, because you've got to love your earth, but there's also, yeah, it's quite a scary time. So it's an interesting balance one has to make. And I think that's why people don't want to do it, because it's very challenging psychologically to do that. You know, so most people they'll know that as soon as they start loving nature, they'll start feeling the destruction of nature, and they can't bear the pain of it. They think, I won't be able to bear the pain of it, because it's like my mother. You know, that's a real challenge. You see what I mean, emotionally. So anyway, we have to deal with all that. So that's why it's so difficult. For all those reasons, it's a very psychological thing, I think. Well, last thing I would say, I don't know if I should say this, but the way out of all that is to realize that it's happening. When you realize that that's what's happening, then it gets then you go a little bit deeper into the body of Gaia. Anyway, that's all I'll say. So yes, any more questions?
There has come a comment for you from Oona Casalegno. Very inspirational. Val Plumwood, an Australian environmental philosopher, was talking a lot about the problem. People seeing themselves as masters of nature. Nature is always understood as a resource for humans. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the problem. You don't see your you don't see your mother as a resource. At least I hope not. You know, one isn't supposed to see one's mother as a resource. So, yeah, exactly. Thinking like that, Earth is a resource, is not seeing her like a living being. It's just something you can plunder as you want. That's the problem of our culture, Western culture, or maybe humans have that. We have that propensity in us. So now, I think we should realize that we have that propensity. We should see that in ourselves, recognize that in ourselves, and know how to deal with it so we don't behave according to those impulses of ours. That's what we need to do. That's not easy. That requires, I would say, a deep ecological experience. That's what's needed. We need to somehow make deep ecological experience happen more frequently.
And yet nature is for so many people really abstract concept nowadays in many cities of the world. Where in Finland we have nature really near, so it's easier maybe for us. But in some bigger cities where children don't see even ever any vegetables, it's really an abstract concept for them.
Of course, so then they have to grow vegetables, you know, in the window boxes and anywhere in the city, anywhere, a roof, a little unused place down below that you can convince the council to give you, make a garden, you know, you make just anywhere you can, green. And then that already is tremendously helpful in cities.
How do you imagine the education system? How could it be so it would make sense with the world? Because nowadays, the way we are teaching children is really from quite an anthropocentric perspective. Mm-hmm. So how would you imagine a new kind of educational system?
It's been done before, you know, by Montessori, Steiner, I think, you know, so we can critique those ways of educating, but I think for me, they've got the right idea. So the first thing you cultivate is a very deep connection with nature and a very deep connection with story. You tell them lots of mythological stories of the land where they are to begin with. By the campfire, you take them out a lot of the education outdoors as much as possible. I mean, they're little children, so they need, in Finland or other places, they need some shelter, but get them out in nature, as good a nature as you can find. I mean, by that, I mean, at least some areas of, well, sort of wild. Yeah, where they can feel something wild. Get them out there very early and do most of the education there. Most of it is how to make a camp, how to work together, how to cook together, how to make a campfire at night, telling stories, hearing stories, painting images from the stories during the day. I don't know, just really get them into the mythological aspect of the forest. Let them really experience it. Because that's the substratum of the psyche. And we need to put our roots deep into that. Otherwise we can't be happy. So that's when you do that, when they're that age, you let them really sink those roots so deep that no Cartesian thinking can ever shake them out of it. Yeah. So then, of course, slowly you start to cultivate their rational faculties. Anyway, I could go on. I think number, though our relationship to number is very wrong at the moment. We use number just purely as merchandise, you know, for counting things, or and of course you can use number like that, but I think little children at some point, they need to realize there's something magical about the number 4. There's something magical about the number 5. There's something magical about these numbers, and they can connect that magic to the magic they felt in the forest. They can feel that connection, and it impresses them quite a lot, you know. It's something they'll never forget. You know, that moment when they realize that, when they're maybe 6 or 7, that's a moment they'll never forget. And then you build on that for the rest of the education. So now you can start to introduce some scientific ideas, maybe, and then you slowly, you tell them, you build up to them understanding the dreadful things that happened with around the time of Descartes and what he did, why he did it. You know, then you have to tell them about the crisis, I suppose, but then tell them about Gaia and all the things we've been doing. So I know I'm rather sketchy towards the end, but you see what I mean? The focus is always on connection with nature.
Do you think that children have this understanding of Gaia naturally, and that something happens and then we have to teach them again to connect? What happens? What do you think?
I think we do have an absolutely 100% totally Gaia-given connection with Gaia.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, we do. I mean, that's our birthright. What happens is culture. And the problem is, what sort of culture? If you're in a Bushman culture, you know, say 300 years ago, or let's make it 600 years ago, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be deeply connected to Gaia and the cosmos. They're really profound. You're going to be very happy, even though you can endure all sorts of physical hardship with that sort of spirit. But we've lost it, you see. We've lost that connection. So are you asking why? Why did we lose it?
Yeah.
Well,
what happens?
What happened? It's very complex. I think one side of us took over, which is the more sort of greedy side that wants to be really comfortable and have power and control over things, you know, which is a part of our humanity. Let's say our territorial, more tribal aspect of ourselves took over. And then when science came along, wow, that tribal thing in us, it had a very powerful weapon. And that's been the problem. It's more or less a tribal, I'm not saying tribal is the wrong way of thinking about it, but no, tribal is fantastic. But I mean, you know, looking after my nation, my this, my that, wanting to acquire things for my nation, for my people, that creates tremendous trouble. Yeah, so I think Gaia can help us overcome that. I think that's what I'm saying. And the idea, if we can all share the idea that the planet is one living being, it doesn't matter who we are, where we are, every single human being can experience that. And I think that should be the aim of education, because then we're all citizens of one planet, all of us, black, white, brown, Hindu, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're all members of one fantastic living earth. And that unites us it's a deeply inspiring idea, which unites us so much. It washes away all the divisions. Of course, it's very difficult. Why is it so difficult for us to feel that? Well, we have a lot of in our culture, we have a lot of impediments that we've done a lot of damage. And so it's difficult to come to terms with that. And also the story, maybe even more than this, the story that Descartes promulgated, you know, that story that that nature is a dead machine, that it's outside us, that we're outside it, it's outside us, that we're really not involved in it, you know, it's sort of, and it's like a gigantic mechanism. That's a power, that idea, I think, has had such a power over us. It's hypnotized us. Mm. And it's hard to break the spell of that idea. But that's what we have to do. Yes, sorry, go on.
No, thanks. Yes, just come a comment from Joanna Ribas. Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you for this great presentation. I'd like to ask, why is the mythological aspect so important for children to connect with nature?
Oh, that's a good question. Mm-hmm. Well, you see, the mythological dimension is the foundation of the psyche, of our psychology, of our psyche, of our mind, of our mental structure. I don't know what you call it. The mythological is the foundation of that. And it's the dream world, if you like. It's the world of dream. When it's the sort of messages that your dreams are telling you. It's the foundation of the psyche. It's nature. So mythology is closest to nature old myth stories. I'm Finland, you must have so many. I mean, I'd love to hear some Finnish folk stories. Just imagine that cultural heritage you've got out there in the forest, by the campfire, by the lake, with these young people telling them a Finnish folk story in Finnish, with someone maybe playing a little bit of, I don't know, some string instrument like this. And can you imagine the impact on young people? Can you feel that? That's mythology. It's very powerful. It connects you with tremendous energies in nature, which children need. We need to have that as our foundation to always, throughout your life, when you hear a folk story, you stop and you really pay attention, because you could learn something very valuable, like you did when you were a child. You see, that's education, I would say.
Joanna put the name of the instrument is kantele.
Kantele, is that your instrument? I'll make a note of that.
Yes.
Kantele.
It's written in the chat if you want to see how to write it.
Kantele. So from cantar, to sing, is it a Latin word? Cantare.
That I need a Finnish person. I'm from France myself, so I cannot answer.
Oh, don't worry. I think Finland. I got it. Kantele. Thank you very much. Yes, that's lovely.
Pekka is checking.
Yeah, thanks. I see. Okay. Yes. And well, how are we doing? Any more questions or any more comments?
Sami, do you have another question?
Yeah, or maybe just a kind of a comment or a follow-up on the mythology thing. I think we have, I think there is a lot of mythology going on at the moment as well, but it's not always recognized. But the problem is that it's all about the human culture, and the metaphysics is about the kind of all the interesting stuff happens between people only, and unlike the hunter-gatherer cultures, where they thought that the major drama was happening out there between like the mega fauna. And in Finland, I mean, there's not very old cultures here, but the moose was one of and the bear, of course, as well. And the old stories were all about them and not people. And I think we need to bring that mythology back, that we get enchanted by other species again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's an absolutely brilliant point. Yeah, I can't agree with you more. You're absolutely right. I mean, maybe once you have the hunter-gatherer stories well established, then you bring in folk stories about humans, because then it's more psychological. But then maybe the young person can make the link between the psychology of the human and nature, which they've learned from the animals. Maybe they can realize the connection between those two. Then that's a very, very important moment. You know, to experience the continuity of psyche or something like that. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. That's the way to do it. You teach them, yes, the animals speak, the trees speak, the rivers speak, everything speaks. And mythological language, especially when you're a child. That's how you should be seeing the world. That's your birthright. You should be encouraged to see the world mythologically. You shouldn't be having to learn mathematics and Latin, unless you really want to, of course. If mathematics or Latin happen to, you stumble across them and you fall in love with them, great. But don't have them rammed down your throat by the schooling system if it's not right for you. It's a very difficult form of education, isn't it? But if we were on small scale, in a local scale, without a huge population like you've got in Finland, you can pioneer it for the rest of the world. So, well, I don't know how we're doing or where we are. Are we closing, or are we going to? I'm happy. I can stay a little bit longer if you need. I'm curious to know if there's anyone else who hasn't spoken.
Is there any more question? I looked at chat. Is there in YouTube?
Okay. I teach design. Now it's in, this is Una. I teach design. You can all read, we can all read it, can't we? Now it's in style to teach human-centric. What was that? Sorry? Human-centric. It's in style to teach human-centric.
Human-driven design. We should teach life-driven or earth. I think she means maybe anthropocentric. Now that all the design that's how I understand the question. That tell Ona Casalegno, if you want, maybe you can put
type it again, Una, will you?
Or you can put your speaker and your microphone on and ask the question.
Yeah, good idea.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we'd like to see you too, if possible.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Yes, if you could turn your camera on, great. If
yeah,
not,
if it works, let me try.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
Hello. Hello. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. I'm a teacher. I actually teach packaging design and branding and all these things a bit for older people. I mean young adults, but I'm teaching design. But now I mean that it's in style to when we are designing for something, it's in style to teach like human-driven design or human-centric, where the humans are the center of the design, or the whole design starts from the design, or we are designing for humans. But I'm just thinking now that maybe we should just teach like life-driven design or earth-driven design, that like we don't make any compromises at all.
Brilliant.
Because everything is always about humans. We design for humans and like that, but it's easily forgotten that the nature and the earth. I don't know. Did I describe it well?
Yeah.
My head is like.
No, I understand you. I think.
Spinning here.
Yeah, I understand you 100%. So. Yes, it's wonderful that you've seen that. You really great. So see if I've understood. You've got to get the young people to shift from thinking of design as being something just for humans and realizing that anything we design has a huge impact on the things that are sustaining us.
Yeah. So no, zero compromises allowed.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes.
Like fully like regenerating design, or like. You know, this Bill Reed, and he's talking also about this regeneration. So like sustainable actually means just sustaining things as they are, but like regenerating design is even, we should give more than we take.
Lovely.
Like, I think like that's like mind blowing.
Yeah, well, just sock it to your students, big time. You know, wrestle them to the ground, make sure they get a distinction in that idea in different ways, encourage them to work on that idea, and each one in a different way for their projects, and to work together. But you know, so they're designing. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, they're designing brands, are they?
Brands, packaging, everything, also objects, anything. Well, just then, designing.
Well, then you know, you can tell them, okay, I want you to design me a lawnmower.
Yeah.
Along these principles. Go on. You got 3 months or whatever. You go and design me that lawnmower with those principles, simple principles. And then someone else, I don't know, they want to do meat packaging. I don't know, but you can get the whole class doing it. Can you do that? Can you do it?
Yeah, something like that. We 2 years ago, I gave them an idea of like, you know, we have a lot of water in Finland. So I said that now you have to brand and sell water. But I was even waiting them to be more critical, but they got really great ideas, but like that.
Oh my God.
You know, this water issue, because some we have, but some don't. But we don't have enough because our waters are not so deep, we have not too much water. But now already, even in Lahti, they are taking a lot of water and selling them. I don't know. They are bringing it quite far. So I think it's quite interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to ask you a lot of questions about that. That's a fascinating situation. But one question I did have was, at no point in that whole process did they question the ethics of what they were doing?
No. And I was very sad about that.
Yeah, that's what strikes me.
Yeah.
And horrifies me, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's scary, isn't it? That, you know.
Yeah, but they were just like, they concentrated in the branding and things like that. Okay. Only few, maybe a little bit questioned, but.
I see. Okay. Wouldn't it be interesting to work with them? Are you still working with the same group?
No, they are already graduating also, but I have always, every autumn time, I have this same kind of course.
Okay. Well, I would suggest, I mean, forgive me for being so presumptuous, you know, but I would suggest you completely realign your entire course on the basis of those principles.
Yeah, I already got so much inspiration from this conference thing, like,
yeah. Well,
it's mind-blowing.
The other thing is stay connected to people who inspire you, because it might be difficult. Your university may oppose it.
No, no, I think they will
really?
go for it. Yeah.
Oh, that gives me hope. That means that things are changing in the mainstream education, in Finland at least, where you'd expect it to change. Finland is, I think, as I said at the beginning, it's a very important country for the world, really. Pioneer in nature connection. Norway and Sweden, of course, too. But anyway, how are we doing? Does that help? I mean, I really hope you can. Well, do it. That's a Schumacher thing to do. You see, that's what we do at Schumacher College.
Yeah.
So stay connected to Schumacher College. I mean, look up on the website. A lot of intellectual content, emotion. I mean, I'm just not just pushing Schumacher College, but it is an amazing place with tremendous connections with people around the world.
I will contact you later on. Because
right.
what we are now doing is that actually we are changing our education in English, because we are already teaching most of our classes, and I'm usually always collecting all our exchange students because I like these very multidisciplinary teams. So we are now starting in English, and actually the first year we are doing a lot of piloting things, and we are starting like design studies as distant courses, because we want to be open for all around the world, all these students. So we could even collaborate with you.
I'd love
if you let me.
Yes, please. 100%.
Oh, right.
Yeah, no, I'm on. Yeah, I'd find that really interesting.
You can continue this conversation maybe a bit later. We don't have much time. I haven't looked so much at time because you told us, Stephan, that you have time. So I didn't know.
It's about an hour now, isn't it?
Yes.
Which is a good length of time.
Yeah.
How are we doing? Is anyone else would like to say something?
They came in YouTube, one question.
Okay.
From Jari Visto, Lynn White Jr. had the opinion in 60s that Judeo-Christian creation myth had a big impact in this wrong kind of relationship towards nature. How do you see this today, 50 years later?
That's a very important question. So here I recommend the book of, can I do chat? Can I send a chat? The book of my friend Julian David.
Yes, please write in the chat. So
I recommend this book. It hasn't come out yet, okay? It's coming out pretty soon. I'll tell you, I just want you to have this reference, Julian David. A Brief History of God. I'll try and write it. So what he's saying is that the creation myth at the foundation of our culture is actually dual. There's two myths tacked on one after the other. Yeah. So our creation myth, Genesis and all of that, Adam and Eve and the whole thing, we think it's one story from one people. It's not like that at all. It's two stories from two different people. One of the people, the first group to whom belongs the earlier part of the story, they worshipped Gaia, they worshipped Elohim, a hermaphrodite god. In the Neolithic, the late Neolithic, all over Mesopotamia, even up to Ireland and up here, and where you are, maybe, I'm not sure it got as far as Finland. So they had this sort of nature-loving, goddess worshipping culture. And the god was both goddess and goddess, a very peaceful culture. And they really cultivated the soil, but they also connected with nature very deeply. And then the other lot, the second part of the myth, comes Adam and Eve and the snake and all those confusing things. That comes from the other culture, which came from the east. These were warriors on horseback with spears, and their god was a sky god. And they wanted land, and they wanted, I don't know what they wanted. They wanted to wreck this mother goddess culture, just wipe it out because it was defenseless, and take over all the land. And that's what happened. And so the myth at the center of our culture is an amalgam of these two different stories, because the god of the sky god is Yahweh, you know, and that's a patriarchal god, and that's the god, the male, masculine, patriarchal god that our culture has inherited. So we need to get back to Elohim, which is the previous god, Elohim. That's what Julian David shows in his masterpiece, Little Book. So mythology can also be messed about by people, you know. So you're right to point that out. We'd have to explain that, you see, to the young people. But to begin with, we teach them stories that are pure, pure, pure. Beautiful nature stories about, as you said, Sami, you know, the ancient stories of the hunter-gatherers to begin with. Absolutely. For weeks, if not months, just hunter-gatherer stories about, and encourage them to talk to the animals, to really listen to the animals, like a hunter-gatherer did. If you can do that for children, you've given them the best, one of the best gifts you can ever give anybody, and to keep that for the rest of your life. Then on that, you can build everything. That's the foundation, you see. You see, it's our foundation, even in an evolutionary sense. That's what our minds used to be like when we were hunter-gatherers. That's how we were. And we still have that within us. Anyway, sorry, anything else?
If I could ask you maybe the last question.
Yeah.
It's related to my work because I'm an art therapist, and I have developed this art-based eco-social pedagogy that I have brought to the school system in Finland. And it's based on expressive arts therapy and phenomenology. And the idea is to help children to reconnect with life phenomena and open a dialogue with life phenomena. And we use arts, every kind of arts for that. And the idea is also to develop eco-social qualities in children and empathy. And my question is, now that I've been doing some thinking, can we think about empathy practice as an anthropocentric practice in a way that it makes humans think that they are special, that they are understanding, that they are compassionate?
Oh, I see. That's an interesting question. But we are, though, aren't we? I mean, when we've really cultivated who we are compassionate, and we are kind, aren't we? So I don't see this. I think that's good, as long as the empathy and the connection and the love extends to the whole of nature. If it doesn't extend to the whole of nature, it's not, can I say, it's not enough. I mean, it can still be love for another human being, but it's not enough. It's not enough in two ways. One, for the planet, it's not enough, and not for yourself either. You know, I mean, if you're able to love the earth like that, then life does become very interesting.
So should we understand again somehow the concept of empathy, that it's not just that we are understanding the modern human world, which makes us separate from it, more as to become part of the world, this kind of empathy. I don't know if I express it right.
Yes, that's it. We become part of the world, yeah. I think so, yeah. It's very meditative, I would say. Or there's a very meditative aspect to it.
Yeah.
You know, you really slow down, you really, for example, right now I can see some clouds in the sky over there moving very, very slowly, you know. So then I'd be able to just really drop into that slowness for a while. Just to really see, just watch the phenomena of those clouds. I mean, how extraordinary it all is that there are clouds in the sky, and that, you know, you drop into that. I think that's the sense of empathy with nature, because then you just naturally fall in love with it. You just do. I mean, it's so beautiful. How you'd have to be crazy not to fall in love with it. You know, and that's empathy. So it's just, it's like that. It's like what we feel for our humans, other humans we love, we feel for nature. It's as simple as that. But unfortunately, it's not so simple. And that's the challenge of being human. It's actually, or Westerners, or moderns, I would say, moderns. Because of what's happened, what we've done to the earth, it's often not so easy for us. But anyway.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much.
To stop.
Been a little bit over 1 hour, so maybe we don't take any more questions, but you can finish by playing us some guitar.
I will. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting talking to you all. Ay, gavilán, pío, 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 tú que vienes volando sobre el río, con tu cola elegante y tu pico amarillo, que cuando te vi volando, que cuando te vi volando, que cuando te vi volando, con tanta gracia y tanta elegancia, mi corazón se abrió a la grandeza de la llanura.